Welcome to Advocacy Arena, the place we bring awareness and solution oriented focus to issues. Today, I am joined by Ngozi, someone that I met in Twitter's sphere. And I am so happy that she has joined me here because she is one of the everyday citizens that I have learned to rely on in having good conversation around what's going on in our political arena. And I want to thank you, Ngozi, for joining me here today to help educate and inspire us with your work. And I would like to give you an opportunity to say hello to the audience and tell them a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you. So hello, Ms. D and Advocacy Arena audience. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. So my background, so I am a licensed uh, school-based mental health therapist. So what that basically means is that I work for a community mental health um, service board, but my agency contracts with a fair number of school districts in my area that allows us as the therapist to go to the school to see the children at school. So they don't have to leave, we come to them.
That is awesome. And how how long have you been doing this kind of work?
So this will be my fifth year.
Okay.
In October, it will be year five, but actually it'll be my sixth year because I actually did school-based therapy as my internship for my master's program, and then I got hired in another
Okay.
agency to do it. So I've been doing it for a little while now.
So, what drew you to this field of work?
Well, I've actually always wanted to be a therapist. I knew that at a very young age I wanted to be a therapist. Um, but it was not until my master's that I've always wanted to work with adolescents and teens as well. I knew that too. I'm very, very passionate about that age group, like that
Okay.
12 to 21 age, which I know people will think 21 is not adolescence, but it's called emerging adulthood. Um,
Mhm.
it's a weird space. So I have always wanted to work in that sphere, but then when I was doing my master's program, I needed more internship hours. And a friend of mine got hired. She got the internship to do. Georgia had launched what is called Project Aware, which was actually a grant funded program from the Obama administration to put licensed mental health clinicians in the schools.
Wow.
One of the school districts, not that far from where I live, had the first contract that Georgia had for that, and they were looking for interns. And so we had reached out because we needed internship hours. So it was actually in doing that work that I realized I love this work. Um,
Wow.
so when I graduated, I was applying for jobs, and the local community service board in my area had a grant for the state of Georgia has what is called the APEX program,
Mm-hmm.
which does the same thing that the grant from the Obama administration does, but this one's actually a state initiative that puts a mental health clinician in the schools. And so my agency had an opening. I applied and was hired. And so I got to work at my dream job, not that far from where I live, uh, almost immediately after getting my master's degree. And I've been here ever
Wow.
since.
That is awesome. And not many people can, say that and to
Yes.
have found your calling so early in is awesome. And I am happy that that's how things worked out for you.
Yes,
And
I
I
am very
know,
lucky.
yeah, because not everyone is that fortunate, but it works that you found an area of work and an area that is close to you to do that work in. That is a blessing.
Yes. So I love it too because I mean, I was working in a county that's about an hour from where I live. But I got the opportunity 2 years ago to come back to my home county. So now I get to be the mental health clinician in the school district that I was educated in and
Okay.
in the school district that I live. So I really get to have that impact that, these kids become workers in our community. They
Right.
become caregivers in our community. So I get to really give back to the school district that I feel like made me part of who I am. So
Right, and to
it's
help
great.
shape and mentor the future leaders of your community should
Yeah.
you decide to stay there. And so that's awesome. So I know that, as I said, we met discussing politics in Twitter Spaces. I met a lot of great people there. One of the best things that ever happened to that app. So tell me about how you got interested in politics, like when and how that came about.
Yes. So I would say that I really got interested in politics in 2012. So Obama's second election. Um, I was an undergrad during the '08 campaign, just really was not paying attention. I didn't start paying attention until I graduated. Had a lot more time on my hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to prepare to vote because I knew that was definitely going to happen. But I didn't want to just go into the voting booth and vote for. I grew up evangelical Christian. That's the space I grew up in. It's the community I went to college in. It's
Mm-hmm.
still a space that is, I mean, it's shaped who I am, so I feel a connection to it. So I understood that avenue and space, but then also my parents are staunch Democrats, and so I understood that space as well. Like my father actually would be concerned that the university I was going to would turn me into a Republican. He is so funny. Um,
Why? Because the school was a what kind of school was he?
yeah, so my undergraduate is a small Christian university.
Oh.
Um, White evangelical based small Christian university. So I mean, it's not well, I can't say that now, but when I was going, it's not as crazy as some of the ones we have.
Mm-hmm.
We would actually joke that we're not as bad as some of the more conservative Christian universities are. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to actually interact with the opposite gender on our campuses, unlike some.
Mm-hmm.
So my father was just concerned because, I was in an environment and an ecosystem where I was being educated through the lens of a more libertarian space.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the people that mentored me at my university were either libertarian or conservative Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting that information at a very pivotal age, in that 18 to 21 space
Right.
where I haven't figured out yet who I am. I'm still learning, I'm still understanding, but I have these people who I respect who are, telling me what it's supposed to be, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in Florida, so I wasn't like I was at home with them for them to kind of rework those things. And so I would come home on breaks and we would be talking about certain things. And my father literally said, "The school is turning her into a Republican. She can't go back."
That's hilarious.
And my mom just looked at him and was like, "She's almost finished." Like, it was so funny.
We're gonna have to get a
Um,
deprogrammer.
yes, she cannot return. So, I like I said, I graduated, moved home, was preparing to vote, and I mean, my parents have been great in that, like, they don't tell us who to vote for. They just talk to us about issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to educate myself on the party platforms, my own personal values, how I was raised, what I believe in, what is important to me. And I looked at both party platforms and I watched both conventions. And there was one particular party that more aligned with my values than the other, which was the Democrat Party. I remember actually being concerned watching the Republican convention because they kept using a lot of us, them language.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had said something like, "Why are we using us, them, when we're supposed to be all Americans? Like that, how's that working?"
Mm-hmm.
So then you watch the DNC and they use a lot of that we, that collective language, which speaks a lot more to my values. I do believe that is all of us together, even if we don't always agree.
Kind of
We,
inclusive under that big tent.
yeah, it wasn't politics of inclusion. The platform was looking to see who all can we bring into the system, whereas the Republican platform and that convention was looking at who all do we exclude. That does not
Mm-hmm.
align with my personal values. And so very proudly went in there and voted for Obama in 2012, knowing that like this is what I want.
Okay.
Um, and then kind of didn't pay attention because at that point I was preparing for like my master's program and trying to get into that and building my adult life. So didn't start paying attention again until 2015. So I remember I was at work when I saw the news article about what uh, Trump said to announce his run, and remember thinking, "Oh, this is a parody. This is a joke."
Oh, is
Uh,
this the escalator pitch?
yes, and I kept seeing articles, and I was like, "Oh, so it's not a joke." And so I went and I watched the video for myself, and I was like, "Oh God, this can't be real life." So that got me paying a lot more attention to what was going on. And Burgerfell was that same year, I think. Um,
Tell the
so
audience
just
what Burgerfeld is. I mean, not
oh
everyone.
yeah, sorry. So that was when the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage was legal.
Mm-hmm.
So there was just a lot more energy around politics in a way that, like, once I had graduated and had a bit more knowledge and education and life experience, I began to understand that like politics is a lot more involved and a lot more things.
Mm-hmm. That it
Um,
kind of covers life, huh?
yeah, yeah. Your whole life is built through that lens of somebody's political perspective.
Right.
So,
It's dictated like what we can and can't do. Our life,
yep,
is very much dictated by politics, the people who are setting those rules and
yep,
determining where we can go and do what we can do and what we can't do and say, uh, all being decided by lawmakers who are politicians, many of whom we get an opportunity to vote for. Yeah, so I love it that you always, all my encounters and conversations with you is as someone who seeks to inform yourself, to be well informed. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that process, how, like you said, you got involved in it. That was like your first election. And how cool is that to be able to cast your first vote for the first Black
yes,
president? Oh my goodness.
yeah.
So, I mean, feel pretty good.
It was very cool. I remember thinking that I got to cast my vote for the first Black president, and I got to cast my vote for the first female presidential candidate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was, yeah, I remember having those moments in the voting booth and just thinking about how, this is my little piece of history. I get to tell my kids, this is what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very cool.
So how do what tools do you use to, like inform yourself? How do you decide? Like, I know you said you talk about your parents being afraid that you were going to get, converted to a Republican, but you didn't. And how, I mean, and it's very likely that you could have.
Yes.
So how did that not happen to you?
For me, I thank God for my parents every day, honestly. We were just always raised to be ourselves. My parents have never pushed anything on us. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure they've always had where they would like for us to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have conversations about, you know, this is what we would like for you to do, but ultimately you have to do what you feel like is best telling you to do. That's always been our mantra. Um, because like I said, we grew up Christian, and so my parents have always been like, we think that this is what God is telling us that you should do, but you have to say that this is what God is telling you to do. So we are praying in agreement together that whatever it is you're doing, it's what God wants for you, and that
Mm-hmm.
freedom to make my own decisions, to not be pressured by an outside force is what's really informed everything else that I do. You're not going to tell me who to vote for just because that's what you want to do. You need to convince me why this is true, and I'm going to match it versus my own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I always want to hear somebody else's perspective of why they believe something, but I know what I stand on too. So I'm just listening to. I want to hear your point, but unless it matches mine, I'm not easily swayed.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to be both educated in that space, where I do think that my teachers and some of them were trying to shape us into good little Republicans, um, which did not work for my class. Um, because I was able to test it back to, no, I know I have my own mind. Thank you for the information, though. So being able to test, I have a professor who would say, test all things and hold fast to the good. So that's what I would do. I would look and see, okay, what is your platform? What is your perspective? What is this other one? Which one is true or truer? Let me
Mm-hmm.
bring that part in.
Mm-hmm. So, after you said Donald Trump, his announcement was the big wake up call. You kind of did your little voting thing, and maybe you thought, okay, well, I've done that, and I'm gonna go on about my business. And then 2016,
Yeah,
ta-da.
yeah, that was a wild ride. So, 2016 was so full of misinformation and disinformation and just outright lies. I
Uh-huh.
don't like being lied to. I don't like being tricked. And if I feel like you're trying to trick me, it automatically makes me not trust you. And because I don't trust you, I can't listen to you. So, because I always felt like not just the media as an entity, but like certain ways in which things were shaped and molded, like the way people would tell certain stories, I was like, what are you trying to get me to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
So because I was suspicious, I read everything. If I heard Donald Trump would make a statement in a speech, I'm gonna go Google it. Google was my best friend. I looked up everything. I
Okay.
was reading, old stories. I didn't care if I had to go back to '99. I'm gonna go back. I wasn't born, and I wasn't it didn't arrive to consciousness until '89. So if something happened in the '80s, I got to go back there because I didn't exist. So let
Mm-hmm.
me go back there and read about it. Um, my mom would actually joke. She'd ask me because by then I was the one in the family who was telling everybody else. We'd watch a speech and I'd be like, no, that's not true, because I'd already looked it up. And she was like, why didn't you just major in politics? Because I would spend so much time trying to learn everything just because there was so much information. I didn't want to feel like I was tricked or lied to.
Mm-hmm. And so, why didn't you choose politics? Did you not know that you cared that much about it at the time, or
Basically.
okay?
Actually, this has actually been something I've been thinking about recently. My parents are immigrants, so even just that coming over, there's a
Mm-hmm.
disconnect between understanding some of the systems in America.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that politics was something you could major in. I didn't know politics was something you could work in.
Okay.
Um, and I was never exposed to
Well,
that
it's
even as a
not the
kid.
way that some people do it, but they have made it a profession. But
Yeah,
yeah.
right. But the idea of like working on a campaign or working as a aide to somebody, that was never a job I envisioned was a possibility. And it's actually
Mm-hmm.
something that I think that current lawmakers could do better at. When I was in elementary school, I met my local leaders. Our senator came to our school and our governor would come. And in
Mm-hmm.
high school, I played violin in high school. I'm classically trained as a violinist. And so we would
Okay.
play like at the state capitol, but nobody really told us what y'all do in this building, you
Right.
know? So I was never exposed to it. And I think politicians now would do a lot better. They would do better to come and talk to the high school kids about what it means to be a senator.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the photo op with the little kids because it's a cute photo to see little kids playing with their senator, but have an assembly where you talk to high school kids about why their vote matters because they're about to vote, um, and that impacts their life.
Absolutely. So you I know that in the course of my getting to know you, have, like in school, high school, college, you have talked about your interest in like World War II and those types of things. I'd like to ask you, also like to tell me a little bit about that, some of like your nerd interests, because we are fellow nerds. It's okay.
Yes. So, I mean, I've always been really interested on how people think. Even as a kid, like, I mean, I was reading like intro psychology textbooks in like fourth grade, right? I'm a weirdo.
I
So,
I know it used to be a big reading area of mine as well. Like
yeah. So
how
I've
the mind
always
works, how
been,
people
yeah,
think.
how do people think? How
Yeah.
do you learn? How do you understand the world around you? And I've always been really, really interested in history,
Hmm.
just because it's fascinating to me that I feel like nothing is really new under the sun.
Right.
I grew up as an American girl, as an American Girl company. So like I read all of the books, Felicity and Addie and all of the girls. I loved them all. And I would actually read the back of the book that would tell you about their time period.
Hmm.
And ultimately, the idea behind it was it didn't matter if it was 1906 or 1944 or 1844. You're the same. You're dealing with the same stuff. And so that always fascinated me about how, there's a time period where there's somebody else who's a 16-year-old girl trying to figure this stuff out 200 years ago. And what does
Hmm.
that mean? And then also, too, how things have changed. So, like the stuff that I'm going through, or I went through when I was 16 in, '05, these kids are dealing with that same stuff, but they have a technology that's changed how they understand what they're going through.
Right.
So that's always fascinated me, just even as a kid, just being like, somebody else was 12 and I was 12.
Exactly. And I think that that too, for me, is part of, the reason that I do enjoy, talking about politics and the effect that it has on our lives, whether you're interested in working in it or not, just having that depth of understanding of the fact that it is affecting you,
Yes.
and the decisions that you are able to make and not make. Some of them are being made for you by politicians. So,
Yep.
um, and also I know that we've had some talks about fascism, those types of things. I know
Yeah.
that one of your areas of interest was like World War II, and we had a conversation at one point where you talked about. How, like, I think most people, it's just typical, like, how could that happen kind of thing. Do you want?
Yeah. Like my first term paper, and this is when we were still writing term papers by hand and on note cards with the encyclopedia, was on World War II, but Nazi Germany's World War II. So I had to write down to understand like what kicked off the war, what the rise of Hitler in Germany and how it all started. And what fascinated me about learning about that was the Holocaust. I mean, I have so many books, and even tying back into like my obsession with the history piece, I have a lot of like Number of the Stars, um, The Devil's Arithmetic. Still think about that book a lot. Just understanding what it was like, Anne Frank, to be
Mm-hmm.
a kid in
Mm-hmm.
that same time period. So like, um, what fascinated me most about the Holocaust was like these were your neighbors literally the year before, friends, neighbors, celebrations, and birthdays together. And over time, it just became very easy for you to turn your back as your neighbors began to empty out of their homes. And it's not like y'all didn't know that the camps were happening, but something had shifted that allowed you to think of your neighbor who a year ago y'all had done a dinner party together, and now they have disappeared, and no one is asking, where have they gone? What is going on? It's the ways in which individuals have been able to shape how other people were reacting to such an atrocity. Even at like 11 years old was just fascinating because I was like, how does this happen? How can you do this?
And do you see any parallels in today and with
Oh,
the youth today? Like you said, you were reading that from a historical standpoint, but how does that, how does it line up for you today? And Yeah.
Yeah, because after educating myself on the rise, the language that gets used, the way in which you take people's grievances and you turn them onto an individual group to say, the thing that is afflicting you is because of those people. When I started seeing that, especially in the 2016, I was thinking it was real serious in that 2016 campaign. I remember being very alarmed and
Mm-hmm.
trying to alarm others that, hey guys, we've been here before, and it didn't end well for a lot of folks. Let's not do that again. So I do see that in which there are definitely problems in this country. People have definitely suffered. Disenfranchisement has afflicted all of us in some way, shape, or form. So the grievances are very real. But to say that the reason why you are afflicted is because of your fellow afflicted person is just mind boggling to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that obviously it is very purposeful because if everyone had banded together to say, hey, we're all struggling in this community because they're purposely keeping us struggling, the people who were forcing people to struggle would lose power.
Right.
And so they have to keep us fighting each other on stuff that's just not, we're all suffering. just because I look like I'm doing okay does not mean I am not too struggling. Because I do
Right.
think there was a space in which, Black people in this country have always suffered. But I think white people had suffered for the first time consciously with that '08 crash. They had been told that a certain lifestyle was going to be afforded to them if they just did XYZ. And when they had to experience a hardship in this space that was a hardship they only heard from their grandparents or great grandparents in some cases, they didn't have the coping skills to manage it,
Mm,
right? So then they looked around and they saw other people suffering through the same thing, and they seem to be managing it just fine. Well, why aren't Black people just as distraught as we are? Well, sweetie, we have the coping skills to manage this.
okay.
We're using them.
We've had a century of it. And this isn't the first time that they would have that difficulty because, we had the Wall Street crash of 1929, and much of that kind of same um, reaction or the lack of
Yes,
coping skills saw a lot of devastation in communities who maybe were not used to having hardships and
right.
devastation. So here we are again, and we've experienced some economic downturns. Our first Black president walked into one
Yes.
such that could have been catastrophic.
I think
Um,
also to seeing the world change. I remember growing up and seeing a ton of diversity on my screens.
mm-hmm,
All of my TV shows had a diverse cast. Um, my friends were a diverse group. I'd never dawned on me to watch a TV show or to be with my friends and everyone looks the same. So I think there was also a generation of people who grew up with the segregated version of TV. Like
mm-hmm,
you've got the Roseanne to the Cosby's kind of situation.
mm-hmm.
And then TV shows started being like, now we're gonna make them a blended family and everyone's gonna be in there together. And again, the lack of coping skills. These people were like, wait, why is there so many Black people on my screen? Wait, y'all are making LGBT people just regular in shows now? And now there's a Black man at the White House. So much was changing on them. It's so fast.
They lost their minds.
They just did not know what to do.
Right. The browning of America, which people had talked about and wrote about, they
Yep.
knew it was coming.
Yep.
And the reckoning is, getting closer. Because I think
Yeah.
when I first learned about it, maybe in the 90s, I think the prediction was in the 2030s. So,
Yes.
we're less than a decade away.
Yes.
And I think it probably that time frame, if they relook at it, is probably already there because I do
Yes.
think the numbers are there. So, and what lies at the base of that? What, white supremacy?
Exactly. Yeah. I remember when we did the census that year. I was in sixth grade, and I helped my parents fill it out, and because they were talking about it at school and everything, in my elementary school, and my teacher had mentioned that she was like, the country will be less white by this time period. Now, me as a little Black child, I don't see the problem.
And
But,
Sound like good times to me.
okay, great. It was not until I became, got a little older that I realized, oh, you were saying that because you were concerned.
You see that as a problem.
So definitely, and again, tying back into, the way people think and what motivates their behavior, it's that that made you scared. Um, Whereas a lot of us, the idea that the country would be more reflective of our regular everyday experiences, that doesn't terrify. I'm used to that system, so why would it? That's familiar.
Hmm.
But there is a generation, and I think people are living longer, so that generation is here longer. Who this is not what they're used to.
Yeah, that would be, like my generation, because I am a segregation baby who
Hmm.
grew up with actually um, integration had been passed um, when I was born. It just had not been implemented. So it
Ah,
took
yes.
that long for me going to school at 5 for it to be implemented. And it wasn't even implemented fully in my
Right.
county. It was just that it was kind of at that point when I started, it was like, it's the law. We can't stop you if you want to come. So my mom and
Yeah.
a couple of other um, people sent their kids over to kindergarten. I was
Yeah.
one of 3 black kids in school, and the other 2 black kids were children of black educators who
Hmm.
taught in the black school because we still had a
Hmm.
black school and a white school.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I was in the 3rd grade that more of the kids in my neighborhood got to go to school with me. And not until I was actually in like the 9th grade was it fully, totally integrated.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I grew up with the schools integrated, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
was born in
Mm-hmm.
89. But
Mm-hmm.
my hometown, when integration became the law, the mayor at that time said, "Oh, integration's not coming to Bibb County,"
Mm-hmm.
and that's when all of our private white flight schools were crafted. But when I was in high school, my high school English teacher went to our high school. So I went to the one of the oldest high schools in our county. It used to be called Lanier High School.
Oh,
Um,
like near Lake Lanier?
yeah, so yeah, Lanier. He's really big down here.
Oh, okay.
So Lake Lanier, yes, that's the haunted lake. So,
Mm-hmm. I know.
but
That's why
yeah,
I was like, Lanier. Oh my goodness.
but yeah. So
Did
my
all
high
your
school,
classmates graduate?
I know, right? So but yes, but it used to be a boys' school. So it was like Lanier High School was the all boys school, white boys school. Clisby was the all girls, white girls school. And our teacher went to Clisby. We could see her picture in the yearbook. So she was teaching us at the very same high school she graduated from when the school was not integrated. The school wasn't even integrated gender wise. Like her graduating class was when they first integrated the schools gender wise.
But it was still
So,
segregated.
but they were still segregated. We had a
How
substitute teacher.
interesting.
Yes.
So, and what does she teach? This
So,
teacher.
so this teacher taught English. I had
Mm-hmm.
another teacher. They were contemporaries. So we had a substitute teacher who also grew up in our town, who she went to the all black school across town. This teacher, she's so passionate about education. She's always wanted to be an educator. She was so passionate about learning. She wanted to learn everything. And her father used to tell her, because she would cry to her dad at home, I want to go to the big school, which was Clisby, and then Linear High. And he would tell her, one day you will, without any evidence to support that. But he wants to encourage his daughter. And she would talk about how their books were broken and old and just not what she knew they had at the white school. And this teacher would cry every day. Because now she is subbing, and our high school, by the time she becomes a sub and she's in her elderly years, this school is so integrated, like we were really half and half almost.
Hmm.
And she would sit there and she would see, I don't think that this high school has graduated a uh, uh, every valedictorian for the last couple of years, I want to say at least 20 years, has been a child of color
Wow.
for valedictorian. And it's an international baccalaureate school, which was created by a Black woman
Mm-hmm.
in our town. When she became principal of that school, she brought IB to it. I just learned that this year, Black History
Okay.
Month. And she would sit there and she would see us mixing in with the white and Black kids, learning from the same textbook, learning from the same teachers. And she would just cry because that was what she always wanted to see. And I remember thinking, she and my English teacher come from the same time period. And it's just fascinating to see the differences because it never, my English teacher never talked about that. She never brought it up, the differences. She would
Mm-hmm.
just talk about how, like, oh yeah, I went to Clisby, the girls' school, which
Because
is
it
further
didn't
down the
change. It
road.
wasn't. It wasn't no big deal for her. Life was just fine for her. So it's those two parallel
Yeah, that split screen.
experiences, lived experiences. So know that how what how'd you feel about that? Like being able to see these two parallel.
Well, it
uh,
made me really passionate about the education of our children
mm-hmm,
and the importance of time passing. Because like I said, my, every year that I was at that high school, the valedictorian was a Black person. So this is what I now know to be normal.
mm-hmm,
And an integrated school is what I know to be normal. Hearing about segregated schools, that was weird, you know.
mm-hmm.
And so knowing the importance of, I want everything that my white counterparts get, because why don't I have that? I wasn't raised to not know that I can have what they have. I lived in the same neighborhood as them too. Like my neighbors, we lived in the more affluent part of town. So my neighbors looked like me. Like all of the kids in my neighborhood, in my apartment complex, we were all from diverse backgrounds. Um, so that was what I was used to playing with. Was, we had the white kid, we had the Black kid, we had a girl. She was half Black and half Korean. We had two our friends. They were from Germany, like straight up German, like born over there and everything. We It just never dawned on us that there's a world that exists where this is not normal.
And when you did find that out, because obviously you did, like how what kind of impact do you feel like that had or left, or
What
does it still?
it's I'm not gonna lie, it still shocks me that people only are friends with people who look like them.
Mm-hmm.
To live in such a silo. And granted, again, my value system is I want to hear everybody's stories. I read books that had different backgrounds than me. I grew up more suburban middle class. I would read books about both upper class and classes below mine, with different backgrounds, and then historical books. And so I'd always look at other people who didn't do that, and I was like, "But why don't you though?" So you just live in your own space. That is just the concept that you would not think about how the other half lives is mind blowing to me. You're not even at least a bit curious to know how somebody who's 12 like you, but lives in the north or lives in a border town, how their experience is different than your experience of being 12 here. That's how I've always viewed it. It was like
But
I would do like the pen pal thing and all that stuff because I want to hear what's everybody else doing.
oh, that's cool. Yeah, I did that for a short period of time. But sometimes, yeah, some people are just not that curious, and then
Yeah,
sometimes people in certain economic circumstances, they don't have time to even
yep,
be curious because their time is spent surviving and
yep,
navigating, the circumstances that they find themselves in. It has been such a
yep.
pleasure talking with you. I want to start getting us wrapping us up, but I don't want to leave without you sharing with us who some of your political influences are, or have been. These can be, historical figures. They can be current political figures, politicians or people who are just advocating in, you know, a political, space somewhat. I'm curious to know who you look up to and who some of your influences, the ideology that you embrace or that resonates with you.
Yeah, so this is actually a very good question. For me, I really look up to uh, political figures who have made decisions that were for the more common good, even if their own personal beliefs weren't necessarily in alignment. Just because I think that's the purpose, right? A representative democracy means we've sent the best person to make decisions for the bulk of us, because the rest of us are going about the business of regular life. You're up
Mm-hmm.
there to go about the business of making the government run for me. So it's important to have people who are there for the common good, not their own personal agenda. And so, I think through a lot of figures like Abraham Lincoln or LBJ, um, Earl Warren on the Supreme Court during his time period, like the
Mm-hmm.
things that making a decision that you knew was going to be for the common good, bigger picture, even though it came at personal cost to yourself in some ways. I really just admire that kind of bravery. But then also too, like I think about MLK and that and the people who worked within the civil rights space in the 60s a lot, because they
Mm-hmm.
were so young. And to have I've always believed that revolution is for the young. They have the idealistic viewpoint to push that. But
Right.
the idea that he was working so hard for a future that he may not have been able to see, and he ultimately did not,
Right.
like we live in the world that he didn't get to see, but his work is what we stand on.
Mm-hmm.
And I oftentimes think through, like, because I work with children,
Mm-hmm.
the work we do now, they will get to stand on that. So that's the mentality I bring to my work, is like I got to give these kids the tools, because their future than what their parents are existing in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Joe Biden's approach to politics, in that, like, he's very much on what is the ultimate goal, what do you want, how do I get you what you want, so you come with me without sacrificing my own personal values to get you
Very,
what you want.
very pragmatic.
Yeah, that is also something that I admire a lot, and I think is um, missing now in the ways we do politics, because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right.
We all got to give
It
a little
very
something.
seldom is, but I don't know. For some reason, there's a lot of people who kind of think that that's where we are because that's
Yeah.
the only kind of negotiation that's going on. But it really has to be negotiated, give and
Uh-huh.
take, and it
Yeah.
always has been for the most. For most legislation to be passed, it's only been, I
Yes.
think, in the last decade or so that this unilateral kind of stuff.
Yeah. But we do know that legislation that is bipartisan lasts longer.
Hmm.
So, it's easier to get, I think, consensus when everybody has some skin in the game.
Hmm.
And so bringing everybody to where everyone is equally invested, I think and how do you do that, right? So watching these people kind of negotiate and talk to folks to get them on board is just kind of really fascinating to see that operation.
Right.
Um, so
Okay.
I'd say
Well,
that.
I think those, like you have to admire people who are willing to to make tough decisions.
Yes.
And, leaders at that level need to be able to do that. And hopefully those decisions are being made for the greatest good, of, the people in the country. So,
Yes.
thank you so much. Would you like to tell us about any future plans that and goals that you have, like in your line of work or your political advocacy that you engage in? Any? goals or plans for the future on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I mean, my main goal also, again, coming back to like my primary values, are just working to continually improve my communication style, because I want to be able to take these very complex things like policy, politics, why stuff matters, how we got here, what did somebody do before that led to where we are now, and break it down and explain it to people who are not paying as close attention as I am.
Okay.
Because most people are just going about their regular life. They're not necessarily thinking about who's sitting in Washington or who's sitting in their state capital. But those people have such an impact on their life. I want to make sure people understand what these people are doing so they can make informed decisions. I think the other important thing is, which is why I get very frustrated with our media, is people can't make good decisions when they're not working off of the facts. And
Right.
people deserve to be respected enough to be given the facts and then be given the respect to make a decision based off of the facts and their own information and knowledge. And so making sure that I make sure that I communicate truth, facts, not the spin, not the drama, so that people can make informed decisions, both in politics and then as a mental health therapist. My parents have to understand what their kid diagnosis is, if they're on medication, the system to how they get their child help. That's all so confusing, and they can't make good decisions when they don't understand what's going on.
Right.
So making sure that I'm able to break down these very large psychological complicated terms and systems in a way that my parents can understand, um, and my kids can understand, because I try to talk to my kids all the time. I don't care that you're 13. It's your treatment. You're the one in therapy with me every week. And making sure that they know so they can make good informed decisions on their own treatment and their own approach to their care. Um, so that's my primary focus at this space, is making sure that I'm being a good communicator of complex things so that people walk away more informed and less confused, hopefully.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for so graciously sharing your time, your thoughts with me, with us today. And I look forward to hearing you back here in Advocacy Arena, because I would like to talk to you more about your work in the realm of therapy for students, because I do think that is a very, very important area, very needful. And I would like to just kind of delve down into that topic with you and see um, how we can become better informed, and what we can do to help in our communities to ensure that all of our students have access to these things. I'd like to give you an opportunity to have some last thoughts, closing words, and tell people where they might find you on social media.
Oh, great. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity and the time. I feel very honored that you think that I have a voice that people can benefit from. So thank you for the opportunity and the platform. I guess my parting words would just be to lead with empathy and be kind to people. We're all significantly more alike than we are different. So if you wouldn't want it happening to you, then don't do it to others. But then people can find me. I'm on Twitter at Ngozi, Ngozi underscore Nnaka, Nnaka. And I'm on Instagram at Knock It Out, Nnaka, or no, Nnakitout. And those are the places you can find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, and I wish you a great rest of the afternoon. And like I said, looking forward to having you back, having more discussions with you in some of the area that you're working in. So, have a great afternoon, and we'll
You
see
too.
you back here again real soon. Thanks for joining us in the advocacy arena.
No, thank you.
Bye bye.